We are given 12 minutes to present, so I'm going to be very, very quick. I'll just give you a very quick overview of the Singapore social security system, and then take you through a review of the objectives set out by the CPF, which is the organization that supervises our pension system, and then talk a little bit about the reforms which have been undertaken and all which we suggest should be undertaken. So Singapore operates a defined contribution pension system. It is mandatory, and it is administered by Central Provident Fund, which is a unit within the Ministry of Manpower. Very quickly, the schematic of the scheme. The individual take ownership of their own retirement, and they get contribution from their own salary as well as the employers into a common account, which then is flowed into 3 accounts: ordinary, special, and MediSave. This is for people who are less than 55 years old. And when they reach 55, they will set up a new account, the extreme right, the retirement account, where they are required to maintain a minimum threshold savings, which we call minimum sum, which means that the retiree cannot draw down the entire retirement savings. So part of their lump sum savings will be invested in a life annuity, and this has become mandatory since last year. So we basically have 2 types of drawdown: a lump sum if you exceed the threshold, and then the threshold amount will be invested in life annuity. Now for the ordinary account, you can actually make pre-retirement withdrawal for children's education, for home ownership, for financial protection, and also for investment. But the money mostly cannot be taken out when you make gains from investment. It has to be plowed back if you cash out from the stock market into your retirement account. The special account is strictly for retirement. Either you leave it in a default account to earn interest, or you invest in some financial instrument. The MediSave is savings designated for hospitalization. It's for inpatient treatment. So this is a snapshot of the current scheme. We have about 3.51 million people, and last year, 2013, the contribution aggregate 28.5 billion. The total balance is about 253 billion now. Let me just read the numbers. I think it's too small. The contribution rate at the beginning of the scheme in 1955 was 10%, with equal contribution from the employer and employee. This rose rapidly to 50%, a very big increase. So imagine 50% of your salary goes into a compulsory retirement saving. That's very high. And you will notice that there was a big drop in 1986, drop from 50 to 35. That's because the government slashed the employer contribution by, I think, 15%, right? This is because of the recession that we encountered in 1986. And so this is one of the feature of the Singapore pension system, where the government has alternative use of this scheme, partly for retirement saving and partly it has been used as a macroeconomic tool. And so this is pretty controversial, and some people feel that is not a right way to use the pension system. Then that happened once again in 1997, and if you recall, I think we had the Asian financial crisis. I think in US nothing happened, the stock market still boomed, but in Asia in 1997 we suffered from the Asian financial crisis, and again the contribution dropped another 10%. So you can see that in Singapore that you can have what we call a national pay cut. And 2 times we have encountered that. And now the contribution rate is very steady at 36%. I think generally the government, the employees, the unions feel that this is a sustainable level at 36%. The contribution rates actually varies across the age group. 35 and below, the contribution rate is 36%, 20 from employee, 16 from employer, and the 36% is distributed in the 3 accounts on the right-hand side, 23, 6, and 7%. This declined very rapidly. For those above 65, you can see the contribution rate dropped to 11.5%. And I'm going to discuss this later on in the reform, that this has contributed to a lack of liquidity for retirees, simply because the rate falls very rapidly as they age. For those who leave their account in the OA or SA account, these are default accounts, they earn interest. In the past, there used to be a common interest, but sometime in 1994, the government decided to pay two different rates, a lower rate for the OA balance and a higher rate for the SA balance. But there's a floor rate of 2.5 for the first account and 4% for the second account. These rates actually are market driven, which means that if the market goes up, you can earn a higher rate of return, but there's a floor, which at least guarantees some compounding for the retirees. So the pension system aimed to achieve the following objective. First is they want to promote home ownership, financial protection, enough funds for healthcare financing, retirement, and then also to grow their assets. And the various schemes that have been introduced from 1968 to as late as 2009 basically support all these goals. I'll go through very quickly the results of some of their initiatives. First, on home ownership, there are two schemes. The first one is for public housing, set up in 1968, and second one is for private housing. This is also a little bit controversial because using pension funds for retirement to buy private property is something that some people feel is not something to be promoted. For public housing, there's a strong justification. The statistics on home ownership is quite remarkable. 90.5% of Singaporeans own their homes. And when you compare this to the other countries, the OECD countries and Asian countries, I think we can say that we are pretty successful at achieving this objective. Now, of course, some people can turn around and say, well, you may own a home, but if the home is not worth anything, that may not be a big achievement. But looking at the property index, this is a private property index in Singapore from mid-1975 to last year. You can see a big jump. Essentially, property rose 16 times, on average 8.8% per annum for the last 38 years. That's for private property. For public property, same kind of results. Prices rose 5 times, or on average, also 8.2% per annum. So Singaporeans not only own their home, they're owning a very expensive piece of assets, which when they reach retirement could be unlocked through unlocking a home equity to finance their retirement. For financial protection, there are two schemes. One is to cover them against death and disability, and the other one is to cover their mortgage. And because the second one is mandatory, the participation rate is very high. So on that score, I think they've done well as well. Healthcare, we operate a 3M framework: MediSave, MediShield, and MediFund. MediSave is savings you accumulate in your account to finance hospital bills, and you can use that not only for yourself, the account holder, you can also use for your dependents. MediShield is a low-cost catastrophic medical insurance. It covers the participant up to age 85. It does not cover pre-existing illness, but I think it will cover big hospital bills, which is not, I think the MediSave account may not be enough to cover this. MediFund is mean tested for those who falls through the crack, who doesn't have enough funds to pay for hospital or to buy the medical insurance. The government step in through mean testing to provide that subsidy. Generally, if you look at the participation rate for MediShield, which is the medical insurance, the participation rate is very high, 93%, even though this is the opt-out scheme. In other words, you can choose not to participate, but the level of participation is pretty high. Now, on retirement adequacy, Singapore require all individuals at age 55, that's a drawdown age, to maintain a minimum sum. Right now, the minimum sum is 148,000. Let me just show you the figures. It has risen gradually from 2005, 90,000 to 148,000 in 2013. This is to adjust for inflation, and I think the level at 148,000 is enough for you to buy a life annuity that will pay you between $1,000 and $1,200 per month until you die. The problem, I think, for this scheme is, well, the scheme is pretty good. The number of people who are able to attain this minimum sum is not quite what we expected. It's about 50%. And also, if you look at the balance of average balance of males and females for different age group, I think it falls short of the 148,000. Okay. So the government has done a few things to tweak the system to try to increase liquidity for retirement, namely to increase contribution rate to the special account and also to increase interest rate paid on those balances. Generally, I think it has been successful, but it's still not adequate enough, and I'll talk about how to use other schemes to unlock liquidity for retirees. And of course, one of the big problems, although we own our own homes, one of the big problems we face is that Singaporeans use a lot of the pension savings for property purchase for their homes. You can see that it's about 44% of cumulative savings, which I think some people feel that this is an over-concentration of savings into one asset. Now, on asset enhancement, we have two schemes based on the funds from OA and SA. Generally, the instrument available for investment is quite staggering. I think it covers almost every product you have in the market, at least for the OA account, the left-hand column. For the SA account, the government deliberately restricts the number of instruments to ensure that not all savings are put at risk. So if you look at the instrument on the right-hand side, they are less risky. So there is a forced, in one sense, a forced diversification on the retiree. Now, if you look at the participation rate, although the menu is very rich, lots of instruments for investment, but the participation rate is relatively low. From OA account, about 12%, from SA, about 20%. So what accounts for the low participation rate? I can think of three reasons. One is that while you may offer the retirees a lot of instruments to invest, not many people are savvy enough to understand the instrument to invest in them. So there's lack of financial literacy, and in fact, they are overwhelmed by choices. In the system, we have 400, for example, 400 mutual funds to invest. And a lot of retirees don't even know how to get started evaluating those instruments. Next is high transaction costs, particularly of Singapore, because the funds tend to be very small. So the front-end load can be as high as 5%, and the management fee can be about 2%. And also, this is a phenomenon that you observe in every market, whether it's US, Europe, or Singapore. They're generally, fund managers don't perform. They can give an average return, but they really don't beat the market at all. So let me just run quickly through the reforms. The most urgent thing, I think, for Singapore pension system is how to enhance retirement adequacy, how to create liquidity for retirement. And a couple of initiatives have been taken. Some are being discussed. First one, raise contribution rate of older age group. I think it's important because when you find that you are putting a lot of money into housing towards the middle part of your life where you have enough, you have paid up your mortgages, and you're ready to accumulate savings for retirement, and the rates goes down very quickly, that's going to hinder your ability to do that. A very important part of creating liquidity is monetization of homes. And in the paper, we discussed 4 methods, but the promising one would be reverse mortgage. How to create a reverse mortgage market that allows even public housing, which can be as high as $1 million, how to unlock the equity. Okay, I think I'll stop here. Later on, if you have questions, I'll go back to this point. Thank you.